Welcome, guys, to another episode of the COVID-19 Effect kind of special edition of these pivotal interviews that I've been doing lately. I'm trying to get as many kind of perspectives or point of views on the market, trying to help the audience and the community, try to get some answers in a very uncertain time that there's really no playbook. And I wanted to bring on Stephanie Leffler, the CEO of OneSpace. And you guys might know OneSpace if you guys follow a lot of my content, because I actually write a lot of the content for their blog. So I wanted to bring on Stephanie and let her kind of explain about OneSpace, but let's just get more into a conversation around kind of digital and e-commerce and CPG, because that is kind of one of the biggest hot topics of COVID-19 that's happening from like a retailing perspective. So I'm going to turn this over to Stephanie, and she can give you a little bit more about her bio, a little bit around OneSpace.
Thanks, Josh. I'm really excited to be here and chat with you today, despite everything that's going on. I think there's a lot to learn from all this. So I'm excited to dig in. Starting at the top, OneSpace is a company that helps CPG brands improve their product information online and ultimately reach more customers and ensure that consumers understand, about the products that they're buying, and really just helps CPGs improve their performance on the digital shelf. My background has been in e-commerce as far as I can remember. Right out of college, I started an online store and was relatively unsuccessful in that pursuit. I fortunately figured out that it was hard to build an online store and sort of parlayed my business into a do-it-yourself e-commerce software platform. And fortunately, lots of others shared my experience, and that was very successful. That company was called Monster Commerce, and we had 10,000 people who were selling their products and services online, and we sort of sold everything that surrounded those. So it gave me a great foundation in e-commerce during the early days as consumers were just starting to shop in that way. I started, after I sold Monster Commerce, I started OneSpace, and we actually started as a company that helped retailers improve their websites, big retailers at massive scale, writing better product content, creating attributes so that consumers could sort and filter in the easiest way possible, and ultimately improve search. And what we saw in starting probably 4 or 5 years ago is that the retailers said, hey, we're not the best, we don't have the most knowledge about these products, brands do. And fortunately, e-commerce was growing enough that brands all of a sudden were starting to invest in digital content and create that stuff themselves. And so we sort of just jumped the fence at that point and said, okay, maybe we shouldn't be helping retailers do this, we should help brands do this. And that's where we sit today. Search is incredibly important in this whole landscape, as we spend a lot of time thinking about search and how to expose products in search, but also once a customer finds a product, how can we give them the confidence that this is the right thing that I want to buy, and go ahead and add to cart and check out. So this has become very relevant, in particular in the last 6 weeks. Many of our customers are CPG companies. So when we talk about CPG, we think about food and beverage companies, both food, regular beverage alcohol. We also have over-the-counter health, beauty, and pet customers. And the people are procuring these products online in record numbers right now. So I think there's a lot of tie-betweens with your podcast and focusing on the COVID pandemic and what we do in the e-commerce space and helping brands adapt.
Now, before we get into some of the other companies, want to ask you a little bit around OneSpace and just how you've kind of changed the way that you guys do business, things that you found, like, I don't want to call them silver lining, but like adaptations that you guys have made to your business that you're saying, oh, wait, when we get out of this, when there's some semblance of normalcy, we're going to actually come out of this probably stronger because we learned some things that we didn't really kind of institute before COVID-19.
It's been a crazy learning experience and process to try to adapt quickly and make sure that our team is protected and that we're doing what we need to do for the greater good. We started working from home before they kind of closed the state of Illinois. We're located in Illinois. And fortunately, we've spent the last 2 years setting up OneSpace to be a virtual or sort of, office-less company. We've got good video conferencing. We have the right collaboration tools. And so the switch from being in office to work from home wasn't as tremendously difficult for us as it was for some. What I think has come out of it, though, is that the way that we use those tools has changed. We've become, better users of our virtual tools. We understand, if you're in Slack, there's a button that you can click and just call somebody rather than, wasting a lot of time having a Slack conversation. We've, I think, done a better job connecting with our customers and, not with sort of a mandatory cadence or an account review in mind. It's been more of like, hey, how are you doing? Is there anything that we can do to help? And I think that's been good. I feel like we've built some stronger relationships, more real relationships with our customers. And then last but not least, we've been doing some just general leadership check-ins across the team. So we're bringing together our leadership team to really find out how everyone is doing and if there's anybody on the team that we need to help. Once again, without a real express intent. And I think we've discovered some good things in those conversations and been able to really look at people's personal lives and how they might be dealing with this. And I think that's something that we'll carry forward, because it's not common to sit around in a leadership team meeting and say, hey, how is your team doing? How is their family life? Are they experiencing anything that's super difficult right now? I mean, maybe one-on-one you do that, but not really as a company. And so it just has shown me that by bringing that into focus, we can really help our team members in the way that we need to in order to ultimately be successful. And that's been a good thing. I think our team has really come together in that way.
I found that to be an interesting kind of positive out of all this, is that because I think a lot of people, are blending family and work together in a more kind of, necessary way, I think. Mm-hmm. And when you're on conference calls, video conference calls, things like that, you get to maybe meet their kids, or they come out of nowhere and you get to meet the dog.
Whether you want to or not, people get to meet my kids. You hear a pitter patter and then a knock on the door, and I say, uh-oh.
You hear the dog, or you hear the cat, or you get to see what their homes look like, and things like that you normally don't get to see. And I think that broadens the relationship between you and a client, or you and an employee, or whatever it is, because I think that there's always something that you hold back. I think you mm-hmm. put on this, game jersey when you go into work, and you're a different person in some, iteration. But then when you're in your normal habitat all the time, I think it breaks down a lot of that, and you get to see and meet people on a different level. So I've actually really enjoyed that. I think at first, when even from like a content perspective, when you're watching like Jimmy Kimmel or Fallon or something like that, at first I was a little bit like, I don't like this, because I want it to be what I'm used to watching. But I started to appreciate it. I'm like, wow, this is like really cool that you actually get to see an aspect of them that you normally wouldn't.
I agree with that entirely. I think the OneSpace team, for anybody who's watching this who knows us, we're a pretty close-knit team. We really do know each other well. We know each other's families. But on the customer side of the house, you're exactly right. We all put on our jerseys, put the polish on and kind of show up and talk shop. And it has been nice to feel a little bit more connected, and like there's something real there where I can see what's going on in their world and they can see what's going on in mine. So, I think the big picture is the concept of video and video conferencing in general is something that I hope everybody is now so much more comfortable with. And even when you're not fully dressed up in the office, being able to connect to somebody and look them in the eye and talk to them as if they're sitting across the table is so much better than just being a voice, on a conference call on the phone. So I hope everybody gets a little bit more comfortable with being online. I know before this, I would always be panicking before a call. I was like, is my camera on? Am I on video right now? And I think that'll be something that does hold after all.
One of the biggest things I think that, any kind of casual person that's watching business has really kind of noticed that there's a few trends that were already in full steam, but have really picked up. And I think around retailing, specifically when we're talking about like CPG retail, so more towards like grocery, but just, I guess, overall in the retail e-commerce side of things, there's been a ton of spotlight that's been put on this, because quite honestly, you have to. If you have stay-at-home orders or restricted living, where if you need certain items and you don't feel safe going outside, how do you get those items? So people are turning to these options in a kind of crazy, staggering pace. I think short term, obviously, there's a ton of great things going on, but just overall, what is your kind of heat check on if this is going to stick around or not?
So a couple weeks ago, I would say my answer would have been, hey, I think clearly some people who just haven't tried this before and are gaining exposure will stick. But the customer service issues as surrounding sort of how you procure, I mean, let's talk groceries, because I feel like that's the least developed segment that's now kind of developing incredibly rapidly. There were some customer service issues around that. I think that those issues existed prior to COVID, but when you look at the quantity of people who flooded some of the services, there were some detrimental customer experiences. If you were trying Instacart for the first time and you found that you couldn't get anything for 3 days, or you went to choose Walmart grocery pickup and there were no delivery slot, there were no slots available for the next week, that's not a great customer experience. Not to mention, when you look at the product information that's out there online, and on average, it's still weak in terms of being able to determine, is this the right item that I want to buy? Is this the one I usually get? Does this have, the right amount of sugar in it, or the right quantity of items in the package? Those are all issues that existed. What has been crazy is to see how rapidly, first of all, some of the retailers have innovated. I mean, I'll point to Instacart in particular. Instacart's service has been incredibly valuable to lots of people. They put out a call a month ago that they were going to hire another 250,000 shoppers, which they did. They announced last week that they're going to hire another 300,000 shoppers, which they're in the process of doing. They've launched new delivery options, so that instead of picking a window, you can kind of pick first available, which allows them to be a lot more efficient as they're gathering these orders and delivering them. They've launched new communication in the app. I'm just saying that the speed with which they have been able to innovate and provide a better customer experience has been awesome. So if I look at Instacart today, it's funny, one of the people who's on our team has been the Instacart account manager at OneSpace forever. And her mom called her and was like, hey, have you heard of this thing called Instacart? And she's like, Mom, I'm so glad that you pay attention when I'm talking about work. Yes, I know of them. But people like that who've tried it and seen Instacart improve, because we've had it now for more than a month, they've been able to see that customer experience rebound and get better. So I think we're going to see a very high number of people stick with these services. And Instacart's not the only one. I mean, Walmart is doing a ton of work too. Other delivery services are too. Shipt is putting a lot of these things in place. So I'm not trying to just single out Instacart as the only winner, but I see real rapid innovation. CPG brands also, I think, are quickly realizing, hey, we need to improve the quality of the information about our items online. And that's been a trend that's been happening for the last 2 years. I mean, it's been slow, but now there's more investment there. Some of the investment that was put into big in-store promotions is being pulled back and put into better product information, which I think is a win for everybody. So I don't know. I'm optimistic that a lot of this is going to stay. Certainly people are going to go back to stores, no doubt. But I think we're going to see, the grocery, overall online grocery anyway, be 2 years ahead of where we would have been otherwise when this is all said and done.
Yeah, I think I've saying about 2 to 3 years, I think it's sped things up, at least from different data sources that I've kind of looked at. And I'm glad that you brought up Instacart, because I think out of any one company in online grocery, they have really kind of jumped up the biggest. I think, like, just from just an exposure level, millions of people are choosing to go with Instacart. And then from the speed of innovation, the things that you mentioned, I mean, the amount of new features they've created in their platform in a matter of a couple of weeks has been insane. It's like every week you see them putting out some, press release or something that's saying like, hey, we solved this problem, this challenge in the system. And I think that that's been something super impressive to me, because it is kind of an awkward introduction for a lot of people to get into online grocery right now, because the systems are at a bending or breaking point. There's so many things that are working against it from a supply and demand type of a thing. So your customer experience is not going to be the most ideal. And not to say that ever has been yet. I mean, this is still a very new thing and we're still learning all kinds of challenges. But I think that Instacart has really addressed those biggest challenges that has been happening just within COVID-19, like where's the buzz at, and then saying, okay, we're gonna create something for that exact problem and try to solve it. And I think that if
100%.
if you compare that to Walmart, you compare that to Amazon, you compare that to Target or whatever, like they're all doing things on their own to obviously fix their, but not, I think, at the level of just precision that Instacart is doing. And I think that that's going to just prove to be like a springboard for them in the future, if they can kind of continue to do that in that direction. CPG, I think this has been something you and I probably have had. Well, I don't want to say headaches, but just like there's been this struggle, I know, in my career for years, of being kind of a digital first consultant and being something that's always been in boardrooms saying, hey, we need to look through the digital lens. We need to look through how does our brand look digitally? It looks great on shelf at Kroger, but it doesn't look good on their websites. Why are you not kind of investing in that thing? And there's always been kind of that a million excuses, I guess, but. To me, I think this is put such a spotlight on how important it is to be putting resources towards the online, I guess, multiple different listing. And this is kind of where you guys come in, because it's not just Amazon, it's not just Walmart. There's, quite honestly, hundreds of different, different ways that your brand is perceived based around those consumers going on to Kroger.com or Albertsons.com or whatever it is. It's like, you can't just have your Amazon look great, even though that might have the most views, but you have to kind of look at it at the aggregator of so many of these different websites. I mean, I'm assuming that you guys are seeing a ton of brands come to you guys now and saying, we've dragged our feet for long enough. It's time to invest into this area. Is that kind of what you're seeing here, or has this been something that's always been going on in the background and it's just kind of accelerating?
I mean, it's been going on in the background, but what's really interesting is the thought process around digital. And I believe that this is going to be the moment that finally changes that for good. Some companies have been getting this right for quite some time, but especially in grocery, and I'll even call out, perishables more than even packaged grocery. They've been sort of the last to the party to understand how important digital is, and in particular their digital packaging. And I do speeches, I always say, if you look at a CPG company who's running a factory, they spend 36 months in an innovation cycle to create a new product, to determine if it tastes good, how to package it, how to make it look good. They spend all this time doing it, and they are incredibly meticulous in that process. When the factory is ready to begin producing the product, they always have the labels there. There's nobody looking around saying, hey, where's the nutritional panel for this? I mean, it's all locked and loaded. It goes to market, and distribution is tight. There are people checking it on the shelves, making sure that it's positioned right, it's turned the right way. So it's an incredibly well-oiled machine. Yet these same companies will take a small team of 3 and say, guys, you're in charge of the digital shelf. You're in charge of e-commerce. And all of a sudden, they really have to put together that same process, that same assembly line for content, the same distribution channel control, and then checking the quality once it reaches the shelf at all of these different customers who actually receive different product. If you think about it from a digital label standpoint, when you're sending a can, for lack of a better term, everybody's getting the same can for the most part. When you're sending digital product content, each of these retailers asks you for different information in a different format. And so not only do you have the challenge of getting it to every place on time, making sure it ends up there, you're actually sending different stuff. So the scale problem that e-commerce teams have to deal with it's pretty crazy. And until recently, there weren't many customers or many companies or CPGs who were really investing in what was required to do that well. And a lot of it is because the percentage of pie for this channel in terms of total sales wasn't big enough to make that investment. I think what we're seeing now is that pie is going to be big enough that it's warranted for the companies to put the people, systems, and resources in place to deliver great product content to all of the different digital shelves. And you're right, Amazon came in and created a big enough slice of the pie for lots of companies that it made sense to invest there, and everybody else was too small. Well, Now we're in a different place. There are people procuring lots of goods outside of Amazon. Amazon's still important, but the ability to manage across the digital shelf is really where you start to gain scale and you start to really see the overall benefit to the bottom line.
I mean, Amazon has been one of those things during COVID-19 that has probably had the most spotlight from a positive and a negative side of things. But I think that it has shown that maybe they're not perfect. And for a CPG brand that has gone all in on Amazon and just thought, hey, the digital channel is Amazon. That's it. That's all we have to worry about. I think it shows a little bit of, kind of cracks in that thought pattern and saying, okay, well, we need to be focusing also some of attention at Target or some of our attention on Walmart, because you're seeing some of the numbers come out with those retailers, and you're seeing, 250% year over year growth in digital, and numbers that are just like astronomically high. And you're saying, well, the customers are going where they need to go. And if you're not in those places and your brand's not represented properly, it doesn't look right. You're going to lose those to an emerging or competitor brand on shelf at that digital shelf. It's broadening the look of the digital channel, because I think that
it is
the way to sell it a lot of times as a strategist is that you lead with your best foot, and that's Amazon. Usually you're like, oh, look at all the business that you're potentially losing, and they get fixated on one retailer. But then I think now they're starting to realize, wow, this has gotten to the scale and that it makes sense to look at other retailers.
That's right. And part of this is the way retailers have reported sales has, I think, has challenged the progress of their digital efforts. So if we look at Walmart reporting grocery pickup sales or Target reporting curbside delivery sales, people forget that those goods are all procured digitally. Just because they're not shipped, it doesn't matter. It's about how the consumer makes the choice from the shelf, grabs it, and puts it into their cart. And when that's happening digitally and you don't have a consumer walking in store, you need to be investing in that more disjointed consumer journey. Like in-store activations aren't going to play if somebody is never getting out of their car. And it's been happening for a while, but when a CPG looks at their sales on Target, they may not see what percentage of those sales are actually coming from a digital shopping experience. And so I think it's put focus on it. If those companies, if the big retailers would help the CPGs understand how many dollars are actually being driven through their digital purchasing channels in a very clear way, I think it would help get better investment. And overall, everybody wins, because the retailer connects with their customers where they want to connect. The CPGs get better product information to the right customers at the right time. And the customer ultimately wins, because they're going to have a better experience if there's better information there for them to consume. So I do hope that as a result of this, some of that reporting improves so CPGs can make better decisions.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think you need to separate those things to show the value, but ultimately it's all omni anyways. You really need to be looking at it as an aggregate, because you don't want to kind of bucket your spending based around the behavioral patterns of the customer. The customer is going to choose how they want to shop, when they want to shop, however they want to get it fulfilled. So you have to think of it as this aggregate, but at the current pace, you're kind of needing it to be broken out for the proper investment to be put towards it. Because right now you're just thinking, oh, my Target sales are up 25%. The stores must be killing it right now. You don't realize that that's actually, 23% of that growth rate is actually coming from maybe pickup, or coming from, hyper local fulfillment, where they're actually picking it from the shelves of the store and shipping it. You're not seeing that break down to the point where you're going, oh, that makes much more sense. But in the long run, it's all the same anyway. So it's kind of weird, because you got to take a step back to move forward.
That's right. I mean, and I hear it every day where, the people who are the small e-commerce team who are trying to internally make an argument to get the resources that they need in order to do this stuff don't have the data. They don't have the information to be able to come in and say, hey, let me explain to you how this works. Here's what it is. Here's the dollars that we're talking about. And that's a big challenge. I feel like that's a place where I hope the retailers will step in and start to improve things so that this can get better for everybody.
I want to kind of zone in and kind of get a little bit tighter here towards more like the tactical side and around product content. And I was kind of curious if you guys have picked up on a few kind of key things that you've been talking to some of your CPG clients and saying, hey, let's look at your product content? Because I think there's that misunderstanding that product content is a project and not a process. Like it needs to be continuously like adjusted. Have you guys been zoning in on some things that have been really working for some of the CPG clients, like certain keywords or certain like maybe images or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are some things that are just continuing to be big winners. So the first thing that sounds so basic that I would say is working is for customers who invest in the management of getting content from their system to the digital shelf. And the reason I say this is because great content, if you create, it has to be there to work. And we're still in an environment where there's a lot of change that happens on that digital shelf after a CPG sends content there that they may not be aware of. So they might send 15 beautiful advanced images that merchandise their product perfectly. And 3 days later, those images might disappear. It's because we're in this time of tremendous change on the retailer side. Systems aren't always perfectly integrated, but the companies who say, hey, I'm actually going to invest in making sure that my content is there and correct continuously are probably overall the biggest winners, because we see lots of people investing in content, but not investing in that continuous last mile delivery of the content to the shelf. So that's number one. As far as the actual product content goes, if you told me today, hey, you have, $1 and you can put it anywhere on the product page, where would you put it? I would say it'd be a real tough call between product titles, which are generally inexpensive but do require some strategy, and images. With mobile phones being so tremendously important in this space and shopping via app, people look at those images as their primary source of product information frequently. If you look at an Amazon page, the actual product description on a mobile device is in Siberia. I mean, you have to work really hard to find it, but the images are top, front, and center. You swipe through them. And so we've been telling customers, hey, it's in your bullets. If it's important enough to be kind of a key selling point, there needs to be an image about it that brings the customer's attention there. And that investment, I would say, is the one that seems to just continue to deliver. Once you get the customer that paid, those images really can help them make their decision and bring forth everything you'd put on a package, but just you have a lot more room and you have a lot more ability to customize that message in a way that's going to connect with the customer.
Kind of a question around maybe I don't want to say opportunistic or like kind of the profiteering aspect of like the search volumes. I know you guys would not be advocating any of that stuff for your clients, but I know you guys also do just like general audits of just the platforms as a whole. Yeah. What's kind of general thoughts on that? And is there some things that you've scratched your head and said like, this is maybe not the way I would approach it?
Yeah, I mean, so if you take Amazon is probably the most wild west in terms of what people do there to win. I think there's I don't know. I honestly struggle with a little bit because search is so critical. It's everything. And in being in the first 6 slots across all the platforms, like there is no platform where people browse through, 10 pages of search results. It just doesn't happen. I was talking to somebody at Instacart recently. I think they said there's an average of 17 or 18 searches per order that happen. So, I don't know what that number is on the other platforms, but it's a lot. People are using search. So as a CPG, on one hand, I'm like, do everything you can do to help your product show up in front of that customer if it matches what they want. I think the worst are the ones that go off script and make crazy claims and do things just to match search volume. I mean, that doesn't help anybody. And I don't actually think it helps the product that is showing up in the search results because they're not connecting with the customer to buy it. But on Amazon, you will see products that have, 40 uses, comma separated in a title. And to me, I think that's a bit overboard. But I think in general, CPG companies, they're not used to expanding their mind in terms of how can I get the way a customer searches into this title without violating legal and regulatory guidelines. So in general, I mean, I scratch my head when I see some of the extreme examples of this, but I also think if CPGs in particular could realize it's a missed opportunity not to help a customer find the product if that's what they're if that's what they're looking for. So, I've presented on this a million times, but if you think about hot dogs versus Franks, it's a very good example. They're like, this is not a hot dog, this is a Frank. And we're like, okay, I get it. But when people search Franks online, they want hot sauce, not hot dogs. So how can we be creative and say, okay, something Franks, 12 pack of hot dogs. There's lots of ways to do it. But at the end of the day, I use the line of, it creates a better customer experience, then it's a good idea. If it detracts from the customer experience, it's a bad idea. And I feel like that helps the CPGs and the retailers stay aligned, and of course with customers.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think that there's that spectrum of the brands that probably are pushing the limits. They are probably pushing way too far. And I think it comes off as going to look bad on them after this all goes back to some semblance of normalcy. Like people are paying attention. They know what's happening, even if they're not necessarily like, chatting about it on social media, whatever. Like this is probably a time where people have the most amount of maybe free time or different free time than they've had in their lives. So people are being very closely watching like what brands are doing, how are they treating their employees, how are they treating customers, how are they, like there's so many things that they're kind of putting in their brain. But on the opposite side of your point, like there's a lot of probably large CPG brands, legacy CPG brands that are so conservative that they probably have some like different use cases of their products that they're just not even mentioning, but are greatly in line with like what consumers are looking for today. They're looking for, different answers to their new questions, being that they're stuck at home. And for whatever reason, I guess I've seen it on both sides, but I wasn't really thinking about the point you made around them not pushing the limits. Cause I tend to work with a lot of like, the emerging brands or ones that are like on the value add functional side that are very much there. They love throwing in a bunch of buzzwords. They love throwing in that kind of stuff. And I'm always like telling them like, chill out, like don't look bad. Where on the opposite side of it, I totally are now seeing that side of it going, wow, they're probably not really pushing the limits to the level they could, because they need to jump up in the search results at a time like this. They don't need to be sitting back and waiting for customers to go to page 3 to get to, something that could be perfect for what they're looking for.
Yeah, it is really interesting. I mean, I think emerging brands, obviously, I would say emerging brands win online over in-store for sure. That's where they're going to gain exposure. I think your point is perfect for emerging brands, which is it's really important to think a little bit like a bigger brand right now and not do things, especially as it relates to the pandemic and the needs of consumers in this time, that is going to be seen as over the edge or disrespectful or sort of, profiting at a time where it's about helping people and what they need. On the other side, the big CPG brands are incredibly conservative around this. And I don't think that that's necessarily misplaced. I think the best way to protect their brand is to be conservative. Yeah. Where I'm coming from with them is that I think that they can take a page from the emerging brands and say, hey, there are some things maybe not related to this particular moment in time where they should be thinking differently, pushing the limits and not being quite so conservative, because you can change things online in a heartbeat. You can't change a package in 36 months putting together and then have to run off a factory line. But if I launch something today on Amazon that I don't think is good for my brand, I can change it tomorrow. And so we need to loosen them up a little bit to understand that you can experiment and be a little less conservative, because you can take care of it very quickly. So it's been interesting. I mean, there have definitely been some things that I've seen online as it relates to the pandemic that I think, that brand should probably not have done that. And I think you're right. Consumers are paying attention.
Well, I've really appreciated the conversation, Stephanie. I wanted to, I guess, let you plug. You guys are also doing a weekly content. I think it's called Lonely Learner.
The Lonely Learner series, right?
Which I would plug you that you're going to be the one actually on today's, but by the time this is up, somebody will have to revert back and watch that one. But if somebody wanted to watch that series, because I know you guys have a number of weeks that are going to be continuing with that, or just following OneSpace or getting in contact with OneSpace, how could they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys can just hit our website at onespace.com. We have links to the whole Lonely Learner series, and there's a lot of really good content up there. You can get to our blog that way. You can get to a contact us form. So please feel free to hit our website. And if you don't see what you're looking for, just reach out and we'll get it to you. Um, it's an interesting time because this industry, meaning CPG e-commerce, is a very heavy conference and live event focused group. It's been one of the things that I love most about this space is that people actually make the effort to go to these conferences and connect because we're all learning so much. It's developing very quickly. It's a good event. I guess events are really important here. So the reason we launched Lonely Learners is because all of that great event content that everybody is getting together to share is not available. And so we're trying to bring some of the best speakers from those different conferences into the Lonely Learner series to keep the content flowing. It's very conversational. So, I hope as people do join that they'll participate and ask questions. That's the whole idea here. But I know everybody in the space is trying to figure out how to keep the information flowing. So thanks for the plug on that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I totally agree. I think this is the time when, everybody needs to think more towards sharing information, collaborating, because we're in a time when, competition is not really all that fun or fair when somebody is weakened by something that they didn't do themselves. So I think at this point, I think
Yes.
push everybody to a point where we get past this, and then we can, compete
Get
like
back into
crazy
the
again.
trenches.
Yeah, get back in the trenches. But right now, I think and I have really appreciated a ton of really great thought leaders, brands, whatever, just oversharing during this time, because I think this is the moment where you just need to just put it all out there and say, hey, we have some things that have been working for us that we'd love to share with other people. Hopefully you guys can also benefit from this, because we want to get to the other side of this so we're all back and we're competing again, because that's when it's fun, when we're all competing at our best. It's not fun when you're competing against somebody that's got a broken leg or something like that. That's that's no
I
fun.
know, I couldn't agree more. I think that's been another good side effect of all of this. And, I think some of that will stay the same, but I agree. It's important that everybody does their best to help one another and to share and stay connected. And so, yeah, I appreciate you doing this. Hopefully, as people are watching this, some people will watch it after all of this has subsided and we're through it. And I think it's been a good learning experience for everybody about how to adapt.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to help support me, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up button on this video. If this is the first time you've been introduced to my videos, would love for you guys to be a part of my community by subscribing to my channel. I upload several videos just like this weekly. And if you guys want to connect further outside of this platform, I do include all of my social media links down below. I just want to thank you guys again for your time. Hopefully I gave you some value in return, and we'll see you guys on the next video.